Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams. We'll talk a little bit about high school football, the New Orleans Saints, the New Orleans Pelicans, the Tulane Green Wave, and the LSU Tigers. And to break it down for us tonight, two of the very best we have in the city. Lenny Vangilder of CrestCitySports.com and Les East of CrestCitySports.com, but so much more. He'll tell you about that. And of course, as always, I'd like to start off letting you guys know, talk a little bit about what you guys are involved in. Welcome to the show. Les, why don't we start with you?
Well, thanks, Eric. Of course, I work with my colleague here at CrescentCitySports.com, following all sorts of stuff. I'm covering the Saints and the Pelicans for the New Iberia newspaper. I cover LSU for SaturdayDownSouth.com. I'm involved with a project called FootballMaven.com. I'm running the Saints website for them, which I think is something that's going to really take off here in the next 6 months to a year. Mm-hmm. So that's something to keep an eye on. And writing for a variety of other websites and newspapers. So staying busy. It's this time of year, you know, with football and basketball overlapping, it's a very busy time. It's
always good to have you. Thanks for your time. Lenny, welcome back. Tell the folks about CrestCitySports.com. You know they're on my favorites.
And a lot of others as well.
Right.
I'm glad to see. November, I think, and November's almost at an end, but I think November ends up being the busiest month of the year for us because we're so much about high school sports, and obviously it's football playoff time, and that's, you know, it shows in the numbers and what we see. It's a time of year that we draw a lot of attention. Our scoreboard on Friday night, the live streams, the coverage leading up to coming out of the games. We had two unbelievable games this weekend on Crescent City Sports. Friday night, we were across the river. John Ehret with a great comeback win over East Ascension. Now they've got to head to West Monroe Friday night for a semifinal game. And then Saturday evening, we were in Old Metairie, and what a great setting it was. Country Day, one game away from getting to the Dome for the first time. But Catholic of New Iberia came in and late comeback, won it 57-54. It was a back and forth, up and down kind of game. A lot of fun to watch. And 8 of the teams are set for the Dome now. We get the other 10 this weekend. Looking forward to see who the teams will be playing in the All-State Sugar Bowl LHSA Prep Classic.
And as far as the local teams that may have a shot, who are they?
Well, John Curtis certainly on the select side. Really, they'll carry the torch there. A lot of others got to the semifinals but just couldn't get over the hump. And then on the non-select side, if it ends up being a Carr Warren Easton Class 4A final, and I think they are the two best teams, and they're both at home Friday night, that's going to be a very entertaining game. It was 21-20 in the regular season, and it could be all that and more if they play again a week from Saturday. And then, you've got some others as well. You've got Destrehan with the shot. Obviously, I mentioned John Ehret going on the road. You've got Amite, who's just up the road in Tangipahoa Parish with a lot of talent that, those people who maybe don't follow teams but follow the recruiting side of it are going to be very interested in watching. So we'll be well represented in Southeast Louisiana for sure come next week.
And of course, the place to find everything about high school athletics.
Of course, check it out at CrescentCitySports.com. No better place.
Guys, Saints 31-17 winners over Atlanta Thanksgiving night in the Dome. They're 10-1, 10 in a row. I'll start off with maybe a broad question. Les, did you see this team in this position in training camp as you were watching this team practice?
Not quite. I thought they were a playoff team. I thought they were probably going to win the division. I don't think I would have predicted 10-1. I certainly wouldn't have predicted 10-1 after the opener. But I think we all saw how close they were last year. I mean, one missed tackle away at the very end from going to the NFC Championship. A lot of the key players to that success last year are young players who are getting better. So I thought they had a chance to be comparable to what they've become. But they are so good right now, and they've gotten so much better over the last 10 games that they're probably a little farther along than I thought they would be. But that they're legit, and they've accomplished everything I thought they were capable of doing, and maybe a little bit more.
Lenny, you were at training camp as well. Did you foresee this?
No. And I would say this. I mean, you never know how things are going to play out. You never know how other teams are going to be. You got to catch teams at the right time. Skip Burtman used to always say, you got to have a little bit of good fortune, right? And
sure.
I mean, I think they've had a little bit of that along the way, maybe catching some teams at the right time and those sorts of things. But the thing that has struck me is how they've done it, effectively with relying on two offensive weapons that Drew Brees has in Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. There have been other guys here and there, a game here, a game there, but really those two guys have gone above and beyond. And then for the defense to do what they have done, who would have ever predicted that you'd have the top-ranked rushing defense in the league right now? I mean, Tampa Bay rushed for 100 the first week, and no one else has rushed for 100 yards since. It's 10 in a row. If they hold Dallas under 100, which will be a tall task, having to deal with Zeke Elliott,
right,
that would tie a franchise record of 11 straight games with holding teams under 100 yards.
That's
rushing.
amazing. What year was that, Lenny? Do you remember?
That was one of the Dome Patrol
Probably
years.
92.
Yeah, I think it was.
92,
yeah. That was definitely in that era. And by the way, mentioning the Dome Patrol there, let's be sure to keep Ricky Jackson in our prayers. There's been some misinformation out there about it, but he's doing okay. He's on the road to recovery. But
now, from what I understand, Eric Dickerson tweeted out yesterday that he had brain surgery. Okay, is that correct?
There was a procedure done, but it was not. I think it was taken a little bit out of proportion there.
Right.
Let's just say that.
Right. Les, you have anything to add on Ricky Jackson?
Well, I mean, he's until Drew Brees came along, he was the greatest Saint ever.
No doubt.
And still the greatest Saints defensive player ever. And great guy, as good an ambassador for the New Orleans Saints organization and the city of New Orleans as we have. Just a great guy who gives back all the time.
Yes.
And of course, we all send our thoughts and prayers out to him, hope for a speedy recovery. It's good to hear that maybe it's not as bad as it might have seemed at one point, and that he's on the road to recovery. But just can't say enough good things about Ricky.
I would agree. I had an opportunity to do a radio show with him for a few years. He invited me to go up to Canton to his induction in the Hall of Fame, which was a great honor on my part to have a chance to be involved in that. He is just a wonderful human being and a guy that has given back to this community since the day that, again, he hit New Orleans. Not just, again, things that he's done off the field. Obviously, he carried this team for so many years on the field as well.
The thing is, I don't think today he is in any way any different than he was when he left Florida to go to the University of Pittsburgh to start his football career.
Right.
He's just totally genuine, down-to-earth human being that he's always been.
No doubt. Lenny, can you add anything?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I mean, I didn't get a chance to know Ricky until his post-playing years, and we had a chance to do a television show with him for several years. And one thing about Ricky is he would bring his opinion.
Yes.
And that was and you working with him in radio as well. You know you've got to have that. If you say nothing, it's it doesn't do much. But he would bring an opinion, and he would back it up with with facts in terms of to support what he was saying as well. It wasn't just a lot of off the cuff that you see out there sometimes.
Yep, and of course on the field, a guy named Lawrence Taylor had all the headlines, but what Ricky Jackson did was just as phenomenal.
Well, he was the guy. He was in that car accident.
Right.
Had a fractured jaw, and I think a week or so later he was playing.
Yes.
I mean, it's just an
Amazing.
unbelievably tough individual.
Never let an injury keep him out of a game. No. I mean, he was incredible. Let's get back to this version of the Saints defense, and that's where I'd like to start because I had to go back and look again today. 17 total turnovers, 10 interceptions, 7 fumbles. They're +8. They're 5th in the league right now. According to my calculations through the season, 16 turnovers in the last 7 games. They've really picked it up. You look at this defense; it's improving. They've had 30 sacks. 61 quarterback kicks, 57 tackles for losses. It's been an amazing transformation from week 1 to week 2. The main thing is we're not seeing the explosive plays that we saw early. This defense now, again, you can say it's because of the offense getting the big league, the same recipe that we saw in 2009, where again, the offense gets a 14 or a 10-point lead. Offensive coordinators throw out the play sheet, and they're trying to play catch-up. But you got to give this defense a lot of credit. As Lenny mentioned, #1 in the NFL against rushing. Didn't see that coming, especially after last season. But they've gotten better at every level of the defense.
Yeah, and the biggest difference between the 09 defense and this defense, and probably the 09 team and this team, is that run defense. And when we talk about them getting a lead and being able to play with an advantage to get sacks and create turnovers, that's not all because of the offense. That's because they're making teams one-dimensional by shutting down the run. So they have a big hand in that. They aren't just reaping the benefits of Drew Brees. They're creating a lot of that on their own. I think we have to give Dennis Allen a lot of credit. Like any other coordinator, he gets a lot of blame when things aren't going well. After the way they played against Tampa Bay, which was terrible, and then they didn't play that great against Cleveland. True. They were lucky to win that game with the missed kicks. It's just gotten better and better and better every week. And the one thing that I think, Sheldon Rankins is having a great year, no doubt about it. He's been a key to all this. Cam Jordan's a great player. Demario Davis is the most overlooked player on this team. That signing was one of the biggest factors in this team's emergence this year. He was the leading tackler with the Jets last year. He's the leading tackler by a mile with the Saints this year. He's just been, I think, the primary force in that run defense. But like you said, they're better on all 3 levels of the defense, and they get better every week, it seems like.
Before I go to Lenny, Eli Apple, how much of a difference he's made? I didn't think he'd make that big of a difference. But again, he seems to be holding down that cornerback spot opposite Lattimore. And Lattimore's playing much like he did last season, where he really wasn't early in the season as well.
Yeah, I think he, and the Saints have alluded to this, and he said it himself, he's not the hardest working guy in practice. I'm not sure he was the hardest working guy in the offseason. I think that's changed as time's gone along. He worked in training camp, he worked in the preseason, and of course in the season, and he's getting back to where he was last year. And I think he's maturing in terms of his work habits, and he's back to being a very good player, and I think he's going to continue to get better. Eli Apple has certainly stabilized the other position at cornerback, and I think we need to say that P.J. Williams is doing a better job as the nickelback than he was doing as the second cornerback. And so I think that's solidified the pass defense as well. But Eli Apple was certainly a significant pickup.
You know, one of the reasons why I love following Lenny Vangilder on Twitter is he is incredible with stats. I mean, he brings stats out that you would never see anywhere else. And Lenny, your thoughts on this defense? I mean, just from a statistical standpoint, but just overall your thoughts as well.
Well, let me first say thank God for Pro Football Reference.
Okay?
It's my go-to site.
We'll put it out there for us.
I need to go find it, but it's at least everything is there that I could go search for in about 10 seconds. You know, but you know, I think it was funny. We may have been sitting here at some point right before the draft last year, after free agency, and I think we might have even said, why did they sign Demario Davis? You felt like the linebacking core was fairly deep, and why did you need to go spend money on another linebacker when there were areas that you felt like maybe you needed to upgrade. Maybe it was that second, the corner to play opposite Lattimore, whatever the case may be. But as Les alluded to, I mean, it's, you know, that is the underrated move of this offseason that really enhanced this defense to a large degree. And I think, you know, on the defensive front, there's been a great deal of improvement there, so much so that those guys are able to hold up. You don't see them unless it's a, you know, a clear pass situation where they've really got to bring a lot of blitzes and to be able to deal with situations, because that front four is so good holding up on its own. And obviously I think the Apple acquisition has been significant in enabling some things to be adjusted. You look since he's really kind of gotten acclimated, just how much better they have played here over the last three or so weeks.
You know, Lenny, for a long time we kept waiting on Sheldon Rankins to really come into his own. I mean, I can remember talking about over and over again, you need to put a big guy next to Rankins so you can get him off. At some point before the season started, I'm like, at some point he's got to get off on himself. I mean, he's got to do it on his own. He's done that this year. He's got 7 sacks coming from that defensive tackle position. I mean, he has really been one of the reasons why this defensive line has played so well. It's something that they've really lacked for a while, that interior pressure. If they got interior pressure, it was moving Jordan inside on passing downs, you know, at times. But they've been able to do it now with 4 down linemen, and you got to give a lot of credit to what Rankins has done thus far.
I agree, and he's probably having a Pro Bowl caliber season, except for the fact that you've got a lot of good interior defensive linemen in the NFC, 2 of which are playing in Los Angeles right now. So it's, you know, that still in all, he's having that. You look at his numbers and you project them out, and potentially a double-digit sack season coming from the inside, something we haven't seen in New Orleans since what, Leroy Glover? Yeah. You know, so you know, that's the kind of numbers you would expect to see out of a Pro Bowl defensive tackle. He may not get it just because of, you know, sheer numbers, but you're right. It's been a huge improvement.
And I think we also need to point out they have a nice rotation on the defensive line. Guys who don't get a lot of attention, like Tyler Davison and David Onyemata, Alex Okafor on the outside, and Marcus Davenport, the #1 pick, who I think is going to be a great player when he has time to stay healthy and develop. But you can see why they made the trade to get him. But they're able to play 7 and 8 guys on the line and keep them fresh. And so I think that whole unit has been significant, in addition to the obvious guys we pointed out as being the leaders.
I want to throw one more guy out there, and I've really been talking about him all season long because we've seen him really kind of come into his own. Von Bell has played well this year.
Yeah, he's one of the more improved players on the team. I don't think there's any question about that. I think he struggled a little bit in those first couple of games, like the defense as a whole, but he's come along very well, really stabilized it in the secondary, been one of those guys who's helped keep it together there. And you're right, he's another guy who deserves some credit.
So much so that Coleman is now just really in base defense, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, you take Marcus Williams as well. When he's been in there, obviously you didn't know what you were going to get out of him, how he was going to deal with the hangover, if you will, of how last season ended. But he's been solid when given the chance as well.
Lenny, the offense, I mean, again, we kind of glaze over it because we're so used to great offense here in New Orleans with Peyton and Breeze here. It's unbelievable, again, how this offense has kind of changed from year to year. And especially now, it seems that Peyton seems to be re-energized now. Aggressive with his play calling, much like we saw back in 2009. The emergence of Taysom Hill and what he's been able to do there. You mentioned with a heavy dose of Kamara and Thomas earlier, but again, undrafted receivers, which we've seen. I know the rest of the country is kind of enamored with that, but we've seen that forever with Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Undrafted free agents, guys that you don't know their names, that come in and play very, very well in this offense. Talk a little bit about where this offense is in 2018.
Well, I think you touched on it right there with those guys. I think saw the stat Brees has tied an NFL record with completing touchdown passes to 13 different receivers this year. And he's got guys getting thrown one to you. You know that they've got that in their mind out there. They won't tell you that, but you know they've got it in their mind. Well, Taysom Hill hasn't caught one yet. Somebody else probably hasn't caught one yet. Right. Yeah, bro, you haven't had him up yet. Right. So you've got some live bullets, if you will, that are out there to be able to still complete passes, complete touchdown passes to. that's still in play to be able to set another record that you didn't have before. But it's just this year is really just tells you what we've seen over the last 13 years, in that it doesn't matter who is at the 5 skill positions. As long as you got number 9 behind center, all is well in the world. And he's going to put the ball in the right places and get you in the right plays to make you successful offensively. He's basically an extension of the head coach out on the field, and he's going to do the right things for you. Every once in a while, sure, does he think, oh, I can make this throw into triple coverage? Yeah, although I think he's become, as he's gotten older and older here, I think he's becoming less and less about that and trying to, force those kind of throws. But he's going to have somebody open out there, and especially when you've got guys like Kamara and Thomas. Look what the Falcons try to do. They basically try to double both of them, or somebody will double one of those guys. Right. It's going to leave somebody out there to be able to deal with. And the other thing, don't forget about all of this is probably the best offensive line he's had in 13 years as well, in that now with their play, you don't have to keep in a tight end to go, to get a chip block on a rush end or something like that. They can pretty much hold their own.
Your thoughts on the offense?
Well, the offensive line has been great. The 09 unit was great. It was voted the best in the NFL that year. That this line's at least as good as the 09 line. So that's a huge factor in it. When a new guy comes in, you'll see it. We don't get to see as much of practice as we used to, but Breeze will stay there 20, 30, 40 minutes after practice is over, especially if there's a new guy. And he's going to sit there and work with them, and they're going to go over his favorite plays for that week. And he's going to explain to the guy, on this route, you need to do this. You need to turn this way. Your hands need to be here. And he puts in so much extra time with guys that they know exactly what he wants. So when they get into a game situation, you may have never heard of the guy, but Breeze already trusts him. And he's going to throw to him, and the guy's going to be in a position to make a play. So it all comes from Breeze's work ethic. This season, Breeze's numbers are off the charts. You go back and you look at stuff from the past. I think of Bob Gibson, the Cardinals pitcher, who back in the 60s had one year, he had 30-something starts. His ERA was like 1.1 or something ridiculous.
68, yep.
30 years from now, there's going to be some kid who's not even born yet is going to be having a phenomenal year, and he's going to threaten Breeze's numbers from this year. And people are going to go back and look at 2018, and they're going to say, that year Drew Brees had in 2018 is unbelievable. He could not have been 39 years old.
Right.
It's just unbelievable.
Well, then why the debate about the MVP at this point? Because I don't get it.
There is no debate.
Right.
Well, I think we're obviously biased. The other candidates are putting up extraordinary numbers, and the one guy who you're not hearing as much of in the MVP conversation, who I think you probably need to, is Aaron Donald. I mean, he's got a legitimate chance here in the last 5 games, depending on if he gets the opportunity. If they've got things wrapped up on one side or locked into it, he might not play the last game of the season, but he's got a chance to put up numbers that we haven't seen in a long, long time. Certainly out of an interior defensive lineman, and I think he would be the one non-quarterback I would have in a conversation. But the game has changed, and the Saints have evolved with it. Okay, you've got other teams starting to do it, just not as well. Okay, but you look at the offensive numbers around the league, and I mean, what is I think it was Peter King may have put it out there earlier this week. I think it was 30 years ago there were 3 quarterbacks with a 90 passer rating. This year there are 22. So the game has definitely changed in terms of how accurate the quarterbacks are, what the receivers are able to do. The rules of the game have certainly changed that as well. And that's not to take away from what is happening, here in our hometown, because I think these guys are doing it better than anyone else. And you're right, Drew is long overdue to win an MVP. And a lot of times with those things, you've voted on these types of things before. I've voted on them. A lot of times they end up being career achievement awards, in some cases. And let's face it, he's long overdue. He probably should have won it at least once, if not twice or 3 times, up until now. So, let's see. There's still 5 weeks to go, and a lot of it's going to be decided by what teams end up doing. But I think he deserves it.
Les, you want to add a point?
Yeah, I think the career achievement thing is probably going to play into his favor with some voters. They're going to look at it and say, well, we probably blew it somewhere along the line. We need to make it up to this guy.
But he is deserving with the year he's
There's no
had.
question he's deserving. I don't think it's even a conversation at this point. The irony of it is, and these are related, is he's going to win his first MVP award in the year when the Saints have demanded the least of him. Because of Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram to a lesser degree, and the offensive line and the defense, he doesn't have to go out and throw 40 passes and throw for 5,000 yards for this team to have the record they have. And yet he's been so good because he's been able to operate with so many things around him that he's had this incredibly efficient season where he's probably going to shatter his own record for completion percentage, and his touchdown to interception ratio is going to be off the charts.
Crazy right now.
And the sacks are ridiculous. I think 10 sacks to this point. So they have leaned on him probably less than they ever have before, and that's what it took for people to give him an MVP award.
Yeah, amazing. And again, as you mentioned, statistically, he's had much better years.
Oh, no,
And again, the team doing well as well. Guys, when I think about what's coming up, and it seems like we've been breaking this schedule down, and we talked about this little stretch here with back-to-back Thursday night games, and then you've got the situation with Tampa Bay, and then you got Carolina, Pittsburgh, Carolina, and we had the stretch where you had the division leaders with Washington, Baltimore, etc. It seems like every challenge they've had in front of them, they've taken that challenge. To me, at this point, as I look around the NFL and I look at this team now first in the NFC. The only team I think that really can beat them is the injury bug at this point. Again, I think they're playing that well that if they continue to do what they're doing on a week-in, week-out basis, take care of the football, offense again plays like it is, and the defense continues to be able to create turnovers. I think the only team that can stop them is again, injuries within their own team. Your thoughts?
I agree completely with that. Sean Payton made a reference the other day about how, every week I hear how we're entering the tough part of our schedule. Well, they did look like a gauntlet there at one point with Baltimore and Minnesota and the Rams and the Eagles.
A physical gauntlet, right? I mean, again, that's very physical.
A lot of physical games, and they didn't even break a sweat. If anything, it got them focused so much that they played even better than they had been up to that point. I agree. Injuries are the only thing that can stop them.
Maybe a little overconfidence. Although I don't know if that's part of this team anymore. Maybe early in the season, but not now.
No, I don't think that's an issue. I don't think there's anybody who's going to come into the Superdome and win a playoff game against this team as it's currently comprised. So unless there are major injuries, they ain't going to lose at home. Now, it's still possible they could stumble in the regular season. The Rams seem to have a little bit of an easier schedule down the stretch. Maybe the Rams could get the NFC title game at home. I wouldn't predict it. But you get the NFC championship, I don't care where they play it. Are you going to take Jared Goff or are you going to take Drew Brees?
Right.
So I agree. The only thing that can stop them is injury.
Lenny, your thoughts?
Yeah, certainly it's going to play a part. Now, the one thing is you talked about the schedule. Saints starting in Dallas, they're one of only 3 teams in the NFL this year that got a 3-game road trip. Just the way it worked out. Now, unlike some of the other teams, it got spread out. You got Dallas, and you got 10 days to Tampa Bay, then you got 8 days to Carolina. So they've got some extra days in there. But the fact of the matter is, from Thanksgiving night till 2 days before Christmas, the Saints don't play a home game.
Right.
And obviously we know they're a better team than home than they are on the road, although this team, its game does travel well, in spite of, especially as this team's kind of evolved and become maybe less dependent on the pass. So you got no margin for error right now in terms of if you want the 1 seed. I think like Les said, probably the Rams' best shot to get knocked off is going to be in Chicago in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
And if the Rams go there and win, I don't know how their game will travel. I really don't. Now Gurley's a good back, but it'd be interesting to see, especially it's primetime game now, so it's going to be even colder instead of in the daytime.
Yes.
What exactly ends up happening in that one, I believe a week from Sunday night. So it's that'll be one certainly worth looking forward to watching. I'm sure New Orleans loves its football. When you see the ratings come out, New Orleans always even when it's a game that doesn't involve the Saints, they draw extraordinary numbers. I'm sure that'll be one of those games that does it as well.
All right, break down that. Do you want to make a comment?
Just to say one thing real quick is, even if the Saints were to lose home field advantage and you bought into the fact that they're a dome team,
yes,
which they're really not, but even if that happens, the only place they would ever have to go for a road game would be Los Angeles.
Right. Yeah.
So weather's never going to be a factor for this team.
Now, the one difference there would be if you're the 2 seed as opposed to the 1 seed, seeds hold, because I know the bracket is flexible in football, but you're looking at having to play Chicago as opposed to the NFC East champion, as it stands right now.
Yes.
And that, in my mind, could be a difference. Obviously, the Saints haven't played the Bears this year. I think that's turning into a pretty salty bunch over there right now.
Talk about tonight's game against Dallas.
Saints touchdown favorite, deservedly so. Yeah, they've stopped the run 10 weeks in a row. I think that's going to be a big part of this. Not only contending with Elliott, but you've got to contend with the read option and Dak Prescott putting the ball down, because that is one thing. If you go back to week 1, that's something that Tampa actually did fairly well. He continued to do some things and let Fitzpatrick run the ball, even though he's not a great running threat, but he did some of that, and really haven't seen a lot of that since then. They're going to see it twice more with Carolina down the road, but that's one of those things you got to watch for.
Les?
Well, that's a factor there. I think Dallas could win this game. This is a potentially dangerous game for the Saints. Everybody will remember they were 13-0 in 2009. Dallas is the team that ended that win streak. It's possible. I don't think it's likely to happen. I think the key to the whole game is, as long as the Saints can put the burden of carrying Dallas to victory on Dak Prescott's shoulders and not Ezekiel Elliott's shoulders, the Cowboys won't be able to do it. So as long as Elliott doesn't go crazy, and I don't see why you would, the way the run defense is playing, I don't think Dak Prescott can make enough plays to keep up with Drew Brees.
They're a different team since they've gotten Amari Cooper. No doubt about it. Gives them a weapon in the passing game. But I don't think they have enough. I don't think they have enough to keep up with the Saints. Defensively, they're a pretty good team. I mean, let's give them credit. They're a pretty good team defensively, but I don't know how they're going to stand up against the Saints offense. Be interesting to see what happens later tonight. All right, Lenny Vangilder and Les East of CrestCitySports.com are our guests tonight. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll take a quick break. Yeah, we're going to come back and talk about that 7-overtime marathon with LSU and Texas A&M. We'll touch on Tulane. They're going bowling this year. And if we have time, we'll talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. I hope we don't have to get to that one, though. We'll be back after a couple minutes of listening to our underwriters. We'll be right back.
Air conditioning, heating, and refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhardt has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhardt's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhardt's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhardt's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guests tonight, Les East and Lenny Vangilder of CrestCitySports.com. We switched to LSU, 9-3 on the regular season. Losers to Texas A&M, 74-72 in a 7-overtime game. They're ranked 10th in the college football poll, so that bodes well for a possible New Year's Six bowl game. A lot of people are saying the Fiesta Bowl for the Tigers, depending on what happens this weekend with the championship games. Les, I'll take you first. Wow. So much to talk about, so many controversial calls. Just your overview of this game.
Well, I was covering the Bayou Classic, so I was in the press box at the Superdome doing some work when the game came down the stretch, and so I was trying to follow on my laptop, and some colleagues were around me, and that's how we followed it. We didn't have it on the TV, so I wasn't able to see it as closely as most people were able to, but crazy game. It's one that changed 1,000 times. It's because every controversial thing and every break seemed to go against LSU. It's easy to look at it and say LSU got robbed. But when you step back and look at each thing individually, I'm not sure there's anything you can point to and just say that was a terrible mistake, obviously the wrong call, and that cost LSU the game. I just don't think it's that black and white. It was an unfortunate sequence of events that factored into the game, and LSU came out on the short end. But, you know, they played 7 overtimes. If they could have gotten one stop, they would have won the game. And there were times where they had an 8-point lead. At least one time, they had an 8-point lead. All they had to do is keep them out of the end zone to stop the 2-point conversion, and they couldn't do it. So, you know, I just think it was as close a game as you could have, and unfortunately the breaks went against them, and they came up short.
You know, Lenny, I balled it down to 3 on the radio show on Monday because I'm going to tell you what, I was still stunned, okay? I mean, you're sitting there after the game's over and you're trying to make heads or tails on what just happened there. You know, obviously the A&M spike with 3 seconds, and then the Sternberger catch and fumble after the hit by Delpit, and then the Greedy Williams pass interference call, which looked to be uncatchable, and of course the subsequent unsportsmanlike call against him. To me, I thought those were the 3 most controversial calls. Your thoughts on the controversial calls, and did they make a difference in this game, in your opinion?
Well, I think certainly that you can, when you get a game like this, any one play can turn it.
Yes.
But I also think that you had opportunities to make plays that you didn't. The one number that jumped out at me in this game was the snap count. I mean, even before this game got to overtime, I mean, you talk about, I think it was 107 plays that A&M was on the field on offense, which means LSU's defense was on the field, not even counting the 2-point conversion plays.
Right.
So you're talking over 110 plays that LSU was on the field trying to play defense. Nobody can play that kind of snap. NFL teams play about half that many snaps, okay? That's a long time. Now, so that's a tired defense out there. What do you do with a tired defense? Well, you're already down a whole bunch of starters, so it's hard to really rotate guys through. But do you gamble a little bit and try to make plays? Do you look to blitz maybe more than they did, because they really didn't an awful lot,
right,
and try to make plays to take some pressure off of your guys? Now, obviously, when you do something like that, guys have to man up and be able to defend if you're sending extra blitzers and such. So, you know, there's that aspect of it. In terms of the calls, I mean, obviously, you know, anyone from an official's perspective is telling you that the spike call was correct.
Right.
You can spike with 3 seconds left. If you're 2, it's the last play of the game. You can't spike it with 2 and have it stop with 1. I've heard some talk about like whether that was illegal formation when they lined up for the spike. That becomes a whole nother discussion. Why they didn't take a harder look and actually stop and look at the fumble, I'm not sure if they could or not. You know, or whether, you know, fumble versus incompletion there, I don't know. I think had it been ruled one way on the field, or however it was ruled on the field, probably would have stayed that way. Was that
I don't think
close?
that was reviewable because the whistle blew.
Right.
But even then, it's also is a clear recovery there. Yeah, the whistle blew, but LSU's going to recover the ball. Then the interference, I think that's a whiff there by all indications, and you could see at that point, I think what happened to Greedy Williams with, you know, getting the unsportsmanlike, that's just a buildup of frustration over everything that had happened from the last drive of regulation.
With Williams and the official, right?
On all fronts,
right?
Sure, you got a lot of tired, frustrated people out there at that point. So certainly, you know, that played into that. But look, I think you had ample opportunity to make one play and win the game. And sure, maybe Delpit makes the play to win the game, and the quarterback's knee is down when if it's a clean snap and he does that, game's over, you know, because they made a bad play and he had a bad snap and he had to go down and, you know, pick up the ball, you know, and went down on a knee to do it. Yeah, it's just it's unfortunate. The good news is, like you said, number 10, and, you know, in all likelihood, barring some kind of real insanity on Saturday in the conference championship games, they should still get to a New Year's Six bowl game, which is something, whatever error you want to take it through, it's something that LSU has not accomplished since that 2011 season. That's a big accomplishment if indeed it does come to pass.
One stat really stuck out to me. A&M, 3 penalties accepted, 25 yards. You play 7 overtimes, and you got one team that has 3 penalties.
Well, wait, there was only one until I think the 6th overtime. They got 2 of them late.
Right. I mean, that's part of, again, why LSU fans are really upset by what happened. What that said is, let's not give Aranda a pass here, nor can we give Ensminger a pass here as well. Again, not getting the first down in regulation that could have kept you never would have got to the 7 overtimes, and then playing the prevent defense and allowing A&M to go right down the field on you, again, to put them in a position to be able to tie the game as well. Again, you got to put something on those coordinators and the players on the field as well for not taking care of business at the end of the game.
Right, and I go back to what I was saying about overtime. It's at some point, I guess a decision got made that we're down these people. We've been on the field a lot. Do we want to single up in all of these places with a bunch of tired guys who are out here because we're playing with fewer players and maybe get exposed? Or do we just try to play a little bit safer and take that approach? They took plan B, and obviously that didn't work. So like we said in the earlier segment, coordinators get too much credit, too much blame sometimes. I think this is a case of that.
I haven't seen Aranda in that type of position where he hasn't been able to figure it out and again, come through for the LSU defense. That was surprising to me. Ensminger, in terms of running Burrow 29 times, I mean, I'm thinking to myself while this is going on, first of all, where was this against Alabama, okay, when you could have run him and you didn't? And then the second thing I'm thinking is, he's getting this kind of yards, what could maybe, again, the running backs do, or a real running quarterback? That guy was at a junior college in Mississippi this year. Your thoughts on, again, the game plan itself, especially as they started to get into the fourth quarter and into overtime?
Yeah, well, they put up 31 points in regulation. That should have been enough to win that game. So I'm not going to get on Ensminger too much. But yeah, the inability to get a first down to run out the clock was harmful. It is eye-opening that Joe Burrow had 29 carries. I don't know, did Herb Tyler ever have 29 carries? I'm trying to remember the last time an LSU quarterback would have had 29 carries.
And he's not really a runner.
Yeah, you wouldn't consider him a candidate for that kind of record. One thing Aranda did do that helped is you noticed early in the overtime, Kellen Mond killed him on the quarterback draw, and then you saw Devin White started spying him, and that was the end of that. So that was a good adjustment. I think you're right about how he had plan A and plan B. He went with plan B. Maybe he should have alternated between the two and brought pressure occasionally, not expose those guys too much, but at the same time, I think just playing that soft approach each time, I just think didn't work, and probably you should have mixed it up a little bit more.
Yeah, and what was interesting to me was to see the frustration on Ed Ogeron's face as this is all playing itself out. And I know he's an animated guy, and you'll see him show that animation at times, even to coaches, and we saw it a little bit with him and Aranda. But generally, at the end of the day, they all go back in, and everything is good. Is there, what happens when this is all said and done? I don't think anybody's saying Dave Aranda's going to get fired. I think if anybody thinks there's going to be any changes on the staff, he's going to go out and do something. The
only way he's gone is if he wants to leave.
Exactly.
Yeah. When the thing is, and Orgeron had a coach for an hour and a half after his Gatorade bath.
Right.
That probably got under his skin too.
Just a bit. And look, I'm thinking to myself as this is going on. First of all, you see the Gatorade bath, you're saying no, okay, because I'm thinking Bluegrass Miracle, okay. But then nothing comes easy for Ed Ogeron. Right. Okay. I mean, you have this gaudy record. People still calling for your head. I'm questioning whether he should get, what type of extension he should get. You're now being questioned now once again about your offensive coordinator. Do you have to make another change at OC? Again, we mentioned the Gatorade, but nothing seems to have come easy for Ed Ogeron. Even again in a game like this where you figure, okay, they're about ready to take care of Texas A&M, going to be in a New Year's Six Bowl, 10-win season.
Still had a chance at the CFP, theoretically.
Yeah, no, theoretically, right.
And that was really a long shot. But they would have been in the Sugar Bowl.
Right.
Okay? Oh, yeah. They would have been in the Sugar Bowl in all unless Georgia would about the only way they wouldn't have been is if either Georgia blew Alabama out on Saturday and Alabama fell out of the top 4, which I really can't see happening in any scenario, or if Georgia played Alabama so close that they only dropped them a spot or two and stayed ahead of LSU. The only two scenarios that I could have seen that would have kept LSU out of the Sugar Bowl with a win on Saturday.
Guys, a lot of chatter about an extension for Ed Ogeron. Number one, deserving. Number two, does he have to have one with just 2 years left on this deal for recruiting? And I've said that if it's going to happen, I think that because he's not a coach that is coveted by other programs, should LSU be in a situation where maybe this contract is maybe a little bit more pro-LSU? I don't think you want to get into a situation where you've seen with Gus Malzahn and other coaches where you want to rush to give the extension and then ultimately things don't work out like maybe you thought they were. What happens?
Well, it's a tricky situation in that I think the guy has done a really good job. But you're right, LSU holds the cards because nobody's going to beat down their door to try and take Ed Ogeron away. So from a practical standpoint, I don't think LSU needs to extend him necessarily, although you start to get to the point where it could impact recruiting. But I think you also need to reward employees that have earned rewards. And I think this guy who basically was given the job because nobody else wanted it, and it was pretty clear that you wanted 2 other people and you settled for him, and he never complained. He was a company guy all along. He just went to work and did a better job than you could have expected when you gave him the job, a better job probably than either Jimbo Fisher or Tom Herman would have done, or at least as good a job. So I think you need to reward him with a contract extension that doesn't expose LSU to a Gus Malzahn situation or something. You don't give him the moon, but extend him for a year or 2 with a modest raise.
I would agree with that.
And take care of him, but don't put yourself in a dangerous spot.
The buyout in LSU's favor.
Right.
Correct.
That's exactly what needs to happen. Is the buyout can't be exorbitant. And I think the other thing you got to look at is this: is you got to kind of let the recruiting landscape tell you some things as well. If there are people in certain other nearby states who are going after the same players as LSU who are using, hey, look, Coach Ogeron's only got 2 years left on his contract. Why you want to go there? He may not be back. He may not be the guy you're playing for. If they start to use that against you, that becomes a completely different animal there. But otherwise, I agree with Les. You need to make sure he's had success. You need to make sure that he's probably got 4 years left on his deal. And again, he deserves a raise for what he's been able to accomplish in 2 years as a permanent coach.
I don't disagree. I would not go crazy with a Powerball type contract. I would give him a modest raise. I'd give him a couple more years for recruiting. Let's see how this thing kind of plays out. Again, but the buyout in LSU's favor. Let's switch to Tulane. 6-6 overall, 5-3, 29-28 winners over Navy. Let Navy back in the game in the second half with throwing the ball, which was really kind of, I don't think I've seen a Navy game where they've thrown the football as much. But you got to give Willie Fritz a lot of credit. Again, they come back, they get the lead, they're behind, they go for the 2-point conversion to win the game. They are now bowl eligible. Guys, your thoughts on Tulane, because they were left for dead before that Tulsa game. I pretty much had said, you know what, I've given them every opportunity. They worked their way back into, again, bowl contention here.
I'm stunned. I wrote them off after the, I guess it was the SMU game. I didn't think there was any way in the world they could win 4 out of 5 games. I thought once they got to the point where I guess they needed one more win with 2 to play, I figured they would lose to Houston. And then I figured there was a good chance they would lose to Navy, because it just seems like in recent years, right when they're on the cusp of something good happening, even if they've done something improbable to put themselves in that spot, then they take a step back and let something slip through their fingers. They didn't do that. They almost did it, but they didn't do it. They won 4 out of 5. Tremendous job by Fritz and his staff and the players. I think it's great that they're going to a bowl. They're pretty much guaranteed a spot. I think the conference doesn't have an excess of teams. So they're going to be in a bowl game. I think it's It doesn't matter how they got there. But I think it's remarkable that they did get there by winning 4 of their last 5 games. It's a great story.
Willie Fritz says he wants you to look at what he's done within the American Athletic Conference, going from 4 to 5 to 6 wins, rather than just look at the overall record. He believes that, again, that you're seeing the advancement of the Tulane program based on what he's doing in the American Athletic.
Well, and they ended up tying for the division title. You know, if they don't let the SMU game slip away in the last 2 minutes, they're playing UCF on Saturday for the conference championship. Now, may have played out a little bit differently, knowing what was at stake and different things. Absolutely, it might have, but that's the one game I think that'll kind of stick with them out of this year from a negative perspective. But I agree with Les. Getting off the deck after that and going 4-1 down the stretch, when you pretty much wrote them off for dead at that point. When they're 2-5, they got to go to Tampa and they got to go to Houston. You figure, and they got to go to Tulsa for that matter. Yes. And somehow find a way to get 2 of those 3 and then win the 2 you've got left at home. Didn't seem very likely, but they managed to do it. And this is a big step for this program. Now the thing that's got to happen is this. We've seen this time and time and time again in the last 50 years of Tulane football. Now you got to sustain it.
Yes.
Got to put together, now, look, you got to really do everything you can to win the bowl game, because if you lose the bowl game, you go 6-7. It's still a losing season.
Yes.
A bowl's great, don't get me wrong, but it would be nice to get that winning season out there. You got to put together another winning season and another winning season. Okay, you've had since the 40s, you've had one stretch of 3 consecutive winning seasons in Tulane football: 79, 80, and 81.
Right.
That's it. So you need to be able to try to do that, and that in my mind is the next step. Look, conference play great, but you've still got to be able to sustain it. People don't put you in bowl games based on what your conference record is. It's based on what your overall record is.
Is it a good litmus test going from 3 to 5 wins within the conference for this program?
Sure, because that's who you're going to play every year, and if you aspire to win conference championships, then that is, that's certainly got to be the measure. So, but it doesn't finalize winning seasons. Look, they've got a formula for how they're going to schedule out of those 4 conference games, and there'll be different opponents, but it'll be pretty consistent. You're going to play an FCS team. You're going to play, 2 of the other 3, probably play 1 Power 5, maybe play a couple other Group of 5 teams in there. They want to talk about Power 6, I know, but still Power 5. And so that's that formula will kind of stay true along the way. It won't be the same teams like you will have in the conference, but you've got to be able to find a way to, at minimum, split those 4 games year in, year out. If not, go 3-1 as this program continues to grow, and then do the things you need to do to put yourself in position to win, at least your division and play for a conference championship.
Les, is the biggest difference in this team down the stretch the emergence of McMillan at quarterback, or again, the growth on the defensive side of the ball?
McMillan. If he had started McMillan against SMU, they'd probably be playing in that conference championship game now. And I'm sure he was this close to pulling the trigger during that game, but Jonathan Banks they had the lead. He kept making just enough plays to warrant leaving him in the game and not messing with a winning formula, and then it got away from him at the end. His stats weren't great game in and game out, but he made plays with his arm and his legs, and his ability to read the defense and know when to keep the ball and know when to let the ball go made a big difference. I mean, you can't say it's single-handedly because of him,
right?
But I think the single biggest factor in winning 4 out of 5 is Justin McMillan.
I agree. I mean, I think that's the one thing that you point to. Talking, and Les is often there on Tuesdays, we get a chance to talk to players. There was one thing that came up a couple of weeks ago about meeting in larger groups as opposed to just positions. To basically create some accountability within the offensive room. Basically everybody but the quarterbacks and the receivers met and talked about the running game. You got guys not making blocks or not holding their blocks long enough, or running backs going the wrong place, whatever it is. Those guys all met as a group and were watching film and going through things, and there was a little bit different mindset after they started doing that, and that happened after the SMU game. So that's one of the things that those guys pointed to a couple of weeks back.
They fired offensive coordinator Doug Ruse. Unusual to fire a coordinator before a bowl game.
Well, the thing that struck me about that is they went out of their way in the statement to say that they were adopting a change in philosophy. So that tells me that Fritz has come to some sort of decision that the offense that he has been running since he got to Tulane needs to be altered in order for him to continue to build this program into what he wants it to be. I don't know exactly what those changes will entail, but there's a reason why that statement, that sentence was put in the statement, that I think he must have had an epiphany of some sort, saying, I have to change this offense fundamentally to take the next step.
Lenny, your thoughts?
It's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens there. Does he have somebody in mind already, and he's going to wait till after the bowl game? Obviously, you're not going to implement wholesale changes here in 2.5 weeks before you have to play a bowl game. But what's to come? That will be an interesting watch here as we head into. I mean, obviously, you got bowl season, then you got recruiting season on the heels of that. And remember, they've got a transfer quarterback sitting out this year from Southern Miss, who, until McMillan really stepped up here the last 5 games, you might have said, oh, he's going to be your quarterback next year. So now let's see how that all plays out.
What bowl game?
I would think at this point the most likely scenario is the Cure Bowl in Orlando. And it could very well be, depending on what happens on Saturday in Sun Belt Championship, it could have an all-Louisiana game. It could be the Green Wave against the Raging Cajuns once again.
Got about 2 minutes left. Congratulations to Nichols. Again, going to the second round of their playoffs. Talk a bit about that.
Well, that was great. It was a big day down in Thibodaux. They dominated that game from beginning to end.
Against San Diego?
Against San Diego.
Yes.
I understand that I didn't see the game, but it sounded like Chase Fourcade had a remarkably good game on the big stage, and that was one of the keys to victory. Great job by Tim Rebo and his staff, as always. Now they got to go play a real powerhouse on the road, but nonetheless, this is a monumental time for Nicholls State football.
Eastern Washington,
right? Eastern Washington, and look, give some credit to Matt Rohn, the athletic director down there, and what they've been able to accomplish over the last 12 months. They have won conference championships, either regular season or tournament, in men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, and football in the last year. So the programs, the Southland programs in Louisiana have traditionally struggled a bit behind the Texas program simply because of budget numbers.
Yes.
But Nichols has done some things here in the last 12 months to really turn some things around. And obviously, Tim Rebo, when he came on board 4 years ago, that's played a large part in what they've been able to do. And a tip of the hat to him and to Chase Fourcade, Conference Player of the Year. What he's done the last 5 weeks, he's been as good as anybody, maybe on that level of football.
Been as good of a football season we've had around here in a long time, huh? Yep.
Absolutely.
Everybody in Louisiana is bowl eligible, by the way.
That's amazing.
Every one of them.
See?
Now, they may not all go, but they're all bowl eligible.
He's always got the stats. Lenny Vangilder of CrestCitySports.com, Les Heath of CrestCitySports.com, and so much more. Thanks so much for being with us tonight here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night at 10 p.m. right here on WLAE-TV. You can also catch us statewide on Pelican Sports Television, 9 o'clock every Friday night. Catch me on the radio, Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2, and the iHeartRadio app. That is noon to 2 weekdays. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. You can also check out all the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to our underwriters as well as our guest tonight, Lenny Vangilder, and also Les Heath. Also, special thanks to our WLAE production staff, Ron Yeager, Jim Dodson. Tonight, William Hill and Naila Jones. We certainly appreciate you checking out the show. Hopefully the Saints get a win tonight, and we'll be right back here next Thursday night for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Thanks so much for watching.